They called you a light, a healer, perfection incarnate, someone who finally made them feel safe. But when your humanity showed, when you got tired or you got messy or complicated or you had needs of your own, suddenly you weren't so safe anymore. This is what I like to call the pedestal trap. And today we're going to talk about what it costs to be idealized and what it takes to break free. So if that sounds like something you want to hear about, stay tuned. You're listening to The Sensible Sessions. I'm your host, Amber Wardell. Along with my guests who range from experts in their fields to people with incredible experiences and perspectives, our hope is to bring you stories designed to make you laugh, make you cry, or make you think, bringing a sensible approach to a world that's lost its mind. So stay tuned and let's start the show. The pedestal is not a compliment. I recently had a friend point out to me how often I point out to other people how messed up I am. And when this friend pointed this out, I remembered that an instance where I did this very, very recently, where I was saying to this person who I had been getting to know over the last few weeks, and I had said, that's me. I'm really messed up. And she said, what do you mean? No, you're perfect. And I remember that sinking feeling I felt when she said that to me and this desperation to correct that, to preempt it. And as my friend pointed out to me how often I do that now, it got me really thinking about what got me started down this path of needing to tell people that I am messed up and why I get so incredibly uncomfortable when people start trying to insist that I'm not messed up. And that's what I want to talk about today because I know that I am not the only person on this planet who feels this way. If there's anything being on social media for over 10 years has taught me is that I've not had a single unique experience in my entire life. So today we're going to break this down. But before we talk about that, let me back up a little bit about how I got here because you probably have a similar story. I have had a really fantastic life filled with accomplishments that I'm really, really proud of. Big milestones, right? Like I got a PhD at a pretty young age. I wrote a book. I got married to a really great guy. I have two wonderful children. I've gotten to travel the world talking about my research. Like big deal bucket list things that have been really, really great. But as I went along, and especially in the more recent years, I've started to notice a pattern emerging. And that pattern is that the more together I seem to appear to others, the more they admired me. And that's to be expected. But the more they admired me, the less room I had to be human. And what I've begun to realize now, after a few years of starting to analyze it, is that I've come to fear it because that admiration is very, very fragile. And it's fragile because it's false. It's a fantasy. And that fantasy is it's a version of me that people create based on the things they're seeing me accomplish, that it is completely divorced from all the rest of me. I became, in many ways, more like a projection than a person. And I'm going to break all this down as we go. Don't worry. So the more that people began to see me as these things that I accomplished instead of a full person, the more I realized I just had less and less room to be this and I could only be that. So the moment I did anything that didn't jive with this over here, it was like this all shattered. These people were not able to hold the reality of me being these two people, like this person who accomplished all of these things and also this person who has big feelings and could be a mess sometimes. They couldn't hold these two contradictory things in mind at the same time. And so the moment that they saw these messy, complicated things about me, they also threw all this in the trash. And that goes not just for me being messy, but also for when my strength was directed at them. So in times when I had to express a boundary to them, or I had to show up needing my needs met, these were times when all of a sudden that admiration that I got from them, it just would either quietly wither or it would explode into something totally different. And that's when I started to understand what that pedestal that they were putting me on with all of this praise and admiration really was. It was never a compliment. It was a spotlight and a stage. It was a place to be observed with nowhere to hide that I never asked to be put on. You see, when someone idealizes you, they're not loving you. They're loving who they need you to be. And we're going to break this down in a little bit. They're asking you to play a role, the role of someone that they have created in their own head, of this ideal person. And so when you show up as not that person that they have created, you're not just disappointing them, you're disrupting their sense of safety that they have projected onto you. And so when they have built up this sense of safety and put it all on your shoulders, and then it turns out that you are not this fantasy that they have built up onto you, that's when the devaluation comes. That's when the discard comes. It comes fast, or it comes loud, or it comes quiet. Sometimes it comes very cruelly and confusingly, but it always comes. And if you're like me, you might have spent a lot of years of your life chasing after those people when the discard came, like begging to scramble back up onto the pedestal, because now you've been rejected or scorned or scolded and cast aside, and you're like, I'll climb back up there. I'll climb back up there. I didn't want to be up there, but I'll go back up there. Just don't cast me aside. And maybe now you've reached an age or a point in your life where you realize, you know what? I'm done. I'm not going back up there, It's not safe for me up there. Maybe it feels safe to you to put me up there, but I'm not safe up there. So you can't keep someone's love up there. There is no love to be found up there. That's what we're starting to learn. Because the only reason you went up on that pedestal in the first place is because the people that put you up there, they admired you and they praised you, and that felt good. And you thought, okay, all right, if this will purchase me some connection and some intimacy and some love, then yes, I'll go up there. I'll go up there. But eventually you realize that all that's up there is loneliness and isolation and the performance of perfection that you can never live up to. The pedestal is lonely. You would really think that being put on top of a pedestal would feel great. You wouldn't think it would feel lonely, because everyone loves to be praised and admired. I remember being young and thinking that my ideal partner would just love me so much that he would want to put me up on a pedestal and just admire me at all times. But I think most things that we thought would be great when we were young turned out to be pretty foolish now that we're older and we see how life really works, right? And the thing that I've realized the most about the pedestal is that not only is it very lonely, but it also just creates a world in which you can never, on the one hand, you're being constantly seen, but you can never be fully seen. Never be fully seen for who and what you are. And I have a TikTok video that I'm going to share with you. Okay. Now listen, this is called the Sensible Sessions podcast. And when I started this, it was with the idea that I was going to remain open-minded and share things that might not always be everybody's cup of tea, maybe not even my own cup of tea. Okay. And so this is actually a video from Jordan Peterson, not my favorite person on the planet. Okay. But I will admit that every now and then he says something that kind of slaps. And this TikTok this clip from, I guess he was on a podcast, is really good. And he's talking about idealization of women, and it's good. So we're going to listen to it and we're going to come back, because everything he says here is spot on.
If you put the woman that you're attracted to on a pedestal, what you're really attracted to is your unconscious idealization of women. And men see their unconscious idealization of women in someone they're attracted to, especially if the attraction is pronounced and immediate, right? That's a projection, psychoanalytically speaking. And then they confuse the woman with that idealization, which is very difficult to bear for the woman because she's not really there. That's the first problem. And second, she's going to get herself in trouble and not know it, because now and then she's going to do something that violates that ideal projection and be called to account for it, even though she doesn't know what rules she's breaking. Plus, the guy won't be able to listen to her or appreciate anything about her that's not perfect or in accordance with that ideal. So that means she can't really talk to him, right? She can't reveal anything that's untoward or...
Ooh. I think we can end. I need those actually. But like you see, there it is. When you're being idealized, you can't be messy. You can't be human. Anytime you are human, that's a betrayal to the person who's put you up on the pedestal. What do you mean? What do you mean you're not perfect? Now you're unsafe. I can't tell you how many times I have been called unsafe by somebody because I had an emotion. I'm having an emotion and now I'm unsafe. It just was so frustrating because it was like, what do you want? And then I went down this path, this very long, disturbing path of healing, of trying to figure out how to be more perfect because I had an emotion. You start second guessing yourself. Like you wonder, you're like, okay, what can I do? Where's the path? Where is the path where it's okay? You start gaslighting yourself and you really start to believe, because some of these people that put you up on the pedestals are really good at making you think that you're the problem. Isn't it crazy? They put you up there because they said that you were safe, that like you were the light that lights the path, that lights the way. They want to be more like you. And then they put you up there to light the path. And then they're telling you how to be. And you're like, now wait the hell a minute. I kind of felt like a screw up before I got up here. Why don't you come up here? I would be happy to take direction from you if I'm being honest. But when you're the character in someone else's fantasy, that role is so confusing and so exhausting. And you're constantly trying to perform that role and you don't know where the guardrails are. You don't know what you're supposed to do. And it's hard to feel safe. You feel constantly at risk, right? And I feel like I'm getting on my own nerves now because I feel like I'm making a victim out of myself and everyone else. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying it's a very destabilizing feeling up on this pedestal that you never asked to be on, right? And I think what's worse, and maybe this is where I'm feeling like I'm uncomfortable with the victim mentality here, is that I think the worst part of it is that there's them putting us up on the pedestal, which we can't control, but what we do to ourselves is the part that we could control that we didn't. It's that we got up there and then we got into our own heads, right? And we allowed ourselves to play our own mental games. We allowed ourselves to go, how could I be doing this better? Okay, yeah, I am the bad guy. I am being unsafe to them. I am being bad. I need to do better. And that's unfortunate. That's looking back, that's the part for me that hurts the most, is realizing that I betrayed myself in those moments. I betrayed my own safety for the safety of somebody else. All for some fake, some false and phony sense of love and connection that was not love and connection in the first place at all. I'm going to make another video about that. That could be a whole other podcast. But that is where the loneliness sets in. You're never fully alone, but you're never fully seen. And you're never allowed to be yourself, because being yourself is unsafe and it comes with consequences. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get back on track before I go into a spiral. Let's talk about why. Why do people do this? Why do people idealize others? Why we put people on pedestals. So, idealization is often a trauma response. When someone doesn't feel safe in their own internal world, they will look outside themselves for someone else to kind of be that anchor for them. This is why, like in spiritual spaces as well as in therapeutic and psychological spaces, we talk about being grounded in your own sense of safety, because you really cannot be going out and finding that in other people. But when we're not grounded in ourselves, we go out looking for that sense of safety in someone else. And that's usually someone who feels stable and calm, capable. And that's not to say that it's a conscious choice. I'm not here to vilify people who do this. I'm just here to say that what's happening is it's coming from the inside, and it is a choice, whether conscious or unconscious, of seeking safety. It is projecting either wounds or unmet needs or fantasies onto another person. It's like saying, you make me feel like I'm finally okay. So I have a video that kind of goes over some of this. This person is talking about it from attachment styles. Just know that this concept of idealizing people, it can happen in people with borderline personality disorder. It can happen with people who have like avoidant attachment styles. It can happen in people with narcissistic tendencies, and it can happen in people with just wounds that they need to address. Okay, there's no like one source of this kind of behavior, but we're just listening to this for the content, not necessarily for like the source of it. Okay, just keep that in mind.
Avoidance and idealization. This is a big subject. Let's do it. Idealization is basically when you create a concept of a person in your brain and then you idealize them. You meet this person, you're like, holy shit, this person is amazing. I could picture them being in my life. I can't wait to travel with them. I can't wait to have their babies. Basically just getting all their best qualities and then projecting yourself into the future with this person. I'm pretty sure we kind of all do this to a certain extent, not exclusively avoidance, but this is where it gets tricky. Avoidance will idealize and create this storyline in the beginning. They'll show up as so present and kind and giving you all the things you've ever wanted. And it's genuine. They're really like enthralled by the concept of you. But at some point, reality slaps them in the face and they are faced with the actual facts of who you are and what it requires to maintain a relationship, which is commitment. And that's when they eject. So they create a story and the story becomes the block between you and that person. You never truly get to know someone when you're relying on the idealization of them. You just remain this concept in their brain. I've noticed that a lot of avoidance that I've met, including past me, have been very rigid in our beliefs and the ways that we see things. We try to reduce you to this idea that we have of you, but that is just so detrimental and inaccurate because you can't reduce a human to your idea. We're literally the most complex creatures on earth. You can never just water someone down to what you think they are. It just doesn't work. So these ideals keep us safe because it keeps you in our brain and it keeps you far away. This also ties into the Phantom X. After there's been too much nervous system activation in the tight-knit relationship, an avoidant will get out of the relationship, allow their nervous system to calm down, and then they'll go back to the ideal that they created of you. And within that ideal, they feel safe enough to have feelings for you again. That's when they reach back out and they're like, hey, I miss you, want to hang out. But as soon as that ideal is broken with the actual facing of who you are and what you require and what the relationship requires, that's when the cycle happens again.
So she covered a lot of ground in just 2 minutes, but you can see there what she's talking about is idealizing someone, then realizing that they are far more complex and complicated than what you thought they were, and then pulling away when you realize, I no longer feel safe because there's so much more needed here in order to maintain a relationship with this person, whether that's romantic, platonic, whatever it may be, and then pulling away. And then once you've pulled back, there's kind of that realization that like, oh, wait a minute, things were actually not that bad. Maybe I actually, the idealization comes back, and the person, the real human person, is somewhere in the middle of the idealized version and the one that you got scared of. You know what I mean? The real person is somewhere in between there. And I think that that's the whiplash for the person who is doing the idealizing, is like they put you on the pedestal and then they see something about you that scares them and they split you into two, and then they go, oh, you're this bad thing now, and they rip you down off of the pedestal and they go, you're this thing, and they run away. And then somewhere down the road, the idealized version comes back to their minds and they're like, oh, wait, you were all of these things. And they come back and you're like, I am neither. You understand? I'm neither of these two things. I am somewhere in the middle. Can you hold that? And a lot of times what you find is that a lot of people cannot do that. I had a second video. Let's take a look at that one, because there's another one that I think is really good here, where she talks about what happens to the person who's doing the idealizing.
Idealizing your partners and putting them on a pedestal will probably make you act inauthentically in order to sustain something that you don't think you're good enough for. Of course, there's nothing wrong with having a crush and being really into somebody, but when we step over the line into idealization and pedestalizing them, we then risk us feeling like we are not good enough as we are in order to attain them, because we've made them into this godlike figure in our minds, right? So to be able to be alongside them, to be their equal, we have to be perfect and godlike ourselves, which is not sustainable or attainable. So the more you see them as this idealized person, the more anxious and nervous you are around them to perform perfectly in order to, meet their expectations, the more you'll act in a way that's not who you are because you don't think who you are is good enough for this idealized person. So no matter how you look at it, idealizing somebody that much, being that nervous around them, having so much anxiety and the uncertainty around them will not be a sustainable connection. You have to bring them to your level or bring yourself to their level. You are equal. No one's better than the other person. And if you see that in a person, if you feel that way about somebody, you might be just idealizing them. And you cannot have a healthy, stable, secure connection with somebody that you idealize to that level.
So what she's describing there is it's heartbreaking for both people in this dynamic. You see that now, right? You've got the person on the pedestal who's having to perform perfection because the idealizer, the one who has idealized them, has said, be perfect, go up there and be perfect. And at the same time, you have the idealizer down here who is now saying, I am not deserving of this person who I have made perfect, who is now being an inauthentic version of themselves, having to perform perfection. And as this person down here is now observing this person performing perfection, all they're seeing is, oh crap, that person is perfect. I don't deserve them. And now they must also try to perform perfection, which is not a side of this I had thought of when I began planning out this video. We've got two people having to be inauthentic. Of course, everything crumbles. That's sad. That's sad for both people. It shouldn't be that way. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for what happens when we've got the person up on the pedestal and then the person who's down here looking up at them and observing them, I want to talk about what comes next, which is usually the devaluation and the discard phase. How people on pedestals get discarded.
There's a kind of love Carl Jung warned us about. And if you've ever felt like this, you'll understand why. To be the object of projection is to be misunderstood in the most flattering yet dangerous way possible. You are not seen. You are used as a screen for someone else's inner drama. In this role, I am no longer a person with flaws and contradictions, but a symbol, a vessel. The moment the projection is withdrawn, the relationship falls apart, or has to be real. But up until that moment, I am elevated, adored, placed on a pedestal so high I can't move without fear of falling. The idealizing gaze is not love, it is blindness. It isolates, it imprisons. And I, the projected upon, become invisible within my own life. I begin to feel guilt for being something less than divine, pressure to sustain a fantasy I never consented to. The more I try to show who I really am, the more they flinch. They do not want me. They want the image they cast on me, glowing and flawless and unreal. This is not connection. This is confinement. And the tragedy is, when I finally break beneath the weight of their illusions, they will call it betrayal.
Owie, that one hurts a little bit. Pedestal feels unstable, and that's because it is. And when things finally crack, they usually unravel pretty fast. And that's when we enter into the discard phase. The discard happens in many different ways. I've seen it happen with a huge dramatic exit. I've seen it happen with a slow, painful pulling away that sometimes is more, somehow that's worse than the dramatic exit. Sometimes it's just like the cruel distance, like the annoyed, calculated cruelty. And you're like, would you just end it then? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different ways that it happens. But in every one of those, you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? But the truth is you didn't do anything wrong other than being human. You just stopped being perfect in their eyes. You showed up in your fullness and their nervous system couldn't handle it. And that's not your fault. That doesn't mean that you didn't make mistakes. That doesn't mean that you can't look back on things and say, I wish I had done this better. I wish I had done that better. That is part of being human. And unfortunately, they managed to convince you that you weren't allowed to be that way. And that's a part of your own brain that needs to be reprogrammed now. And that's part of what makes this cycle so painful is the whiplash of the relationship coming to an end, the abandonment wounds, the feelings of loss, and then also the realizations of your own role in it, of how you gaslit yourself, of how you abandoned yourself, and realizing the work now that you have to do to process the loss and the grief and the confusion, and then process all of the deeper, kind of darker stuff about you and why you allowed yourself to be put in that position. And for many of us, that can just be a really difficult path. Because at the end of the day, we were just trying to be loved. We were just looking to be understood. We feel like we have a lot of love to give, a lot of empathy, a lot of heart to give. And we're just looking for someone to give it in return. And it's why so many of us now go to such great lengths to not be put back on the pedestal. If you're someone who keeps getting put on pedestals, here's what I want you to know. It is not your job to perform someone else's fantasy. Stay grounded. Keep showing up in your fullness, even if that fullness doesn't feel like what you're expected to be showing up as, okay? Share your joy and share your fears. Don't over-identify with your mess either, okay? You don't need to be making everyone think that you're like a walking disaster. Find the middle. But when someone starts praising you in a way that feels like a little too grand, a little too early, ask yourself, do they know me well enough yet to be praising me this way? Or are they just trying to feel safe through me? And when you realize that this praise is coming too fast and too soon, it may be time to start setting some energetic boundaries and expectations right away. You are not put here to be a savior or a muse or to be the mirror for someone else's healing. You are on your own journey, and that journey is sovereign. Don't let anybody else mess with that. And if you find yourself idealizing others, I have been there. Just get curious about why. Ask yourself why that may be. A few questions you could ask are like, what am I hoping they'll fix for me? Or what am I projecting onto them that I'm scared to face in myself? That's always a good one. The truth is that you don't need to be rescued. You have everything you need inside of yourself. And this is where deep shadow work comes in. I have Jackie Faber coming back onto my podcast. We're filming tomorrow, but it'll be coming on next week, where we're going to be talking about doing deep shadow work. And doing that shadow work is actually what helps enable you to recognize that you have the tools and the answers and everything you need inside of yourself. So if you feel like you're the kind of person who is projecting those needs onto other people because you don't think you have what it takes on the inside, I promise you do. Maybe you need to check back in with next week's podcast and check out what Jackie has to say about that. Pedestals are lonely. Fantasies are fragile, but real love and real connection is built on the foundation of truth and authenticity. We just got to figure out how to meet each other there. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. If this conversation stirred something in you, I do have kind of a longer and more in-depth episode where I talked about this in a little bit more detail that I uploaded last week. I will have it linked in a card and also down in the description box below if you want to go check that out. I'm going to be doing kind of a series on this topic, so make sure you subscribe so that you continue to see more on this topic as I continue to roll these out. As always, if this episode meant something to you, it would mean so much if you would give it a like. I have had this YouTube channel for almost 10 years, and it did just get verified about a week ago, which was really exciting. I let this channel kind of die on the vine for a few years while I was off doing other things, and I'm trying to excavate it out of the dirt and get it back into the algorithm. So if you could leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji, just something to tell YouTube that, hey, the channel is not dead, it's back, we're doing stuff now, that would be so great. So I'm always grateful for things like that. Otherwise, I'm just grateful for you to be here watching the content I'm putting out. Love you, mean it, always. Mwah! And I'll see you in the next one.